I really need to start getting a jar where every time I make a prediction about some AAA game or some Xbox exclusive or some PlayStation release or some PC port, every time I say something about one of those games, I'll put a penny in the jar, right? If I do that, I'll be a millionaire within like 5 weeks. Okay. Like, it is crazy. It is crazy seeing how accurately I can predict the future when it comes to these video game releases. Like, everything is a failure. Forspoken, Final Fantasy 16, Street Fighter 6, Diablo 4. Like, all of it has just collapsed in among itself for one reason or another, right? And Starfield, I think, is a really interesting case because this is an example, I think, of a company's last stand, right? This is Bethesda trying to convince us, trying to prove that they still got it, that they can come out here and make an open universe game, a game that's bigger, better, better than Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, right? This was their moment to shine. This was their major release of the decade. This was supposed to be a big juggernaut thing, and it's come out to absolute crickets, right? Like, right now, I'm seeing a bunch of people in my comment section who I'm sure are shills, right? Coming in and trying to say, oh, I actually really like the game. It gets really good like 30 hours in. Like, making all these excuses for it, saying that, like, oh, you just don't understand how intricate the game is. All those messy mechanics that you don't understand, that don't make any sense, and are just poorly implemented. Like, spend 30 hours with them, and you'll suddenly realize that this is an organic living universe, right? The greatest open universe game ever made. Right now, it seems like the shills are trying to get people to stop refunding the game because I have seen quite a few people like publicly announce they're refunding the game due to like crashes, due to bugs, due to wokeness. Like, there are all sorts of reasons to like not support Starfield, right? But when it comes down to, and I do think like this is the core of the issue when it comes to like all of these releases, Armored Core 6, Final Fantasy 16, Diablo 4, Street Fighter 6, Forspoken, Hi-Fi Rush, like everything that's come out this year, is that no matter what the game is, no matter what publisher, no matter what genre, no matter what platform it releases on, no matter how popular it is, no matter how many units it sells, no matter how much money it makes, it cannot be as good as the average Nintendo release. Like, that's the situation we're in now, where games like Starfield are getting overshadowed by like relatively minor Nintendo games. Tears of the Kingdom, I would say, is not a major release from Nintendo, from simply because of the fact that it reuses a ton of assets from a previous game, right? Just like Majora's Mask wasn't the next generation Zelda to Ocarina of Time, Tears of the Kingdom, in a lot of ways, is not the next generation Zelda. And as a result of that, we have no idea really how popular Zelda is going to be in the foreseeable future. When we see like Nintendo finally unveil the next Zelda game, which at this point nobody is talking about because nobody is expecting to see it all that soon. But like, when we get the next Zelda game, when we see just how far Nintendo has gone with like their creativity and going off the wall and like innovating on the open world genre, like whether it's like crazy far out environments or new mechanics, or what I expect to see like a lot more physical abilities for Link, making him like the most OP character in an open world game in existence. Like, what I expect to see is just more and more dominance from the Nintendo camp. And unlike something like Fallout 4 70 or Fallout 76 or Starfield, people are going to keep playing these games, right? I'm shocked at how much time I've put into Breath of the Wild after Tears of the Kingdom came out. I'm shocked how much I've played Tears of the Kingdom after finishing it. I'm shocked at how much I've been going back and playing games like Ocarina of Time, Oracle of Ages, Minish Cap, like, older Zelda games, right? I want to go back and play Twilight Princess. I would have if if I wasn't too lazy to set up my Wii U. Like, it is incredible to me how much time and energy I spend like playing and enjoying these games because of how much I love them, how much I enjoy them, and I think like it's not just me, right? Like, the reason these games are so appealing to me as a person is because they're such well-made, well-crafted experiences. I'm beginning to realize more and more that, like, no, I wasn't weird for liking this growing up. I wasn't some nerd, like, I was someone who understood the value and appreciated the artistry of what the developers made with Wind Waker, with Twilight Princess, with Skyward Sword, with Spirit Tracks, with A Link Between Worlds. Like even before the Renaissance with Breath of the Wild, I was singing the praises of The Legend of Zelda and still maintained that it was the greatest video game franchise in the world, even with people crying about how Dark Souls was going to eclipse it, how Skyrim was going to eclipse it, how like Nintendo was old and outdated and would soon go out of business, right? Like I was told that all throughout like all throughout my childhood, right? And so like kind of seeing like Nintendo dominate the industry, stomping like major corporations like Disney into the dirt, seeing Microsoft and Sony scramble to stay relevant, seeing companies like Bethesda, who a decade ago were weaponized against Nintendo, kind of fall flat on their face when it comes to their next big release. Like after a string of like major failures, like The Evil Within, and like a number of other titles, right? Like there are there is nothing about Bethesda that's worth of your respect at this point. Like their ancient claim to fame, something they did back in the 90s, being the creators of Daggerfall and the biggest game ever, like it's not a big deal anymore, right? Anyone who like looks back in Daggerfall on some like as some like major milestone in gaming are just nostalgic fanboys. People like Razorfist, people like Ricada. Like there have been so many better open world games from Nintendo over the past several decades that it is almost embarrassing seeing people cling on to Daggerfall's success as like some kind of cultural milestone when like nobody even knows what it is, right? Right? Like I'm not even sure if Daggerfall is even available on modern platforms. I know Morrowind is. I own it, but like I tried to play Morrowind, don't like it. Tried to play Oblivion, don't like it. Tried to play Skyrim, don't like it. Like there is no value to these games for me because I actually have better games I could be playing instead. And that is the long and short of it. That is the issue with Starfield. Like even if the game was good, even if it was fully functional, even if it was like engaging, had like unique aspects to it, like had some merit, which it doesn't. Like even if it was a good, legitimately well-made game, it still 100% never could compete with Zelda or what Nintendo is doing, right? Like it is going to get stomped into the dirt by Tears of the Kingdom. It is going to get stomped in the dirt by Super Mario Bros. Wonder. It is going to get stomped in the dirt by Pokemon and just continue to get stomped by like Animal Crossing and stuff like that. Like it won't be all that much longer until we start seeing like games like Animal Crossing outperforming like GTA releases, right? We're reaching that point where a number of Nintendo franchises are becoming like regular 20 million sellers, right? Like it's remarkable, like going into this, like it's weird thinking how earlier in the year we legit were speculating that like, oh, how much is Tears of the Kingdom going to sell? Like 5 million units. I could not have anticipated that it would have sold 20 million, like four times more than my highest estimate. It within like the first month, right? Like I greatly underestimated like the success and popularity of Tears of the Kingdom, and the reason for that was because so many people on the internet like are so adamant that Tears of the Kingdom is not a good game, that no that Zelda is not a good game, that Breath of the Wild was a fluke, that like nobody would be interested in playing a direct sequel, that like in a way they kind of gaslit me. Like I knew the game would be successful to a certain extent, but I expected it would sell significantly less than Breath of the Wild. And seeing seeing it like soar past Elden Ring, seeing it soar past Cyberpunk 2077, seeing it soar past all this crap that was forced on us over the past couple of years has been like a really vindicating experience, right? Right, there are still like some big major milestones we still have to overcome, like namely Take Two, the creators of Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto. I think those are like really the only major obstacle Nintendo has to dominating the console space, and those releases are so sparse and so infrequent that I think it is only a matter of time until like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead just collapse and Nintendo just kind of takes their market share. You can't just rely on like one or two franchises to carry you through a console generation. And increasingly, that's what we're seeing from all these studios, right? Like we're seeing CD Projekt Red release Cyberpunk 2077 in 2020 and then spend like the over 5 years right? Trying to fix the game, trying to get the patches out, trying to do this, trying to do that. Like they're never going to fix Cyberpunk 2077, but what's worse is that they're also never going to produce another game, right? And I don't think Bethesda is nearly in like as poor of a position as CD Projekt Red is right now. Like at least they have like a healthy portfolio and they don't have to like rely on Witcher money and they don't have to like what CD Projekt Red was always like heavily astroturf, promoted to the top because of like BioWare suddenly like collapse when they couldn't handle it. They didn't have the talent to like maintain the illusion that they were some like hardcore AAA like open world RPG developer, right? Like the instant that they had to compete against like real games like Zelda, like Xenoblade, they just completely collapsed, right? And we are seeing that more and more often with all these studios. Like they just cannot compete with Nintendo. And I think more and more people are going to see that these new releases just aren't all that appealing. Like even now, in the height of like the Starfield hype cycle, I'm thinking to myself, like looking at this gameplay footage, wandering around these empty wastelands, seeing these randomly placed locations on a map, seeing like the boring caves and like the locations and like the gunplay and like the enemy, like the lack of enemy variety and like just the terrible, ugly character models and just like the woke aspects. Like there's so many aspects of Starfield that are just laughably bad in like a post Breath of the Wild world, right? And nobody wants to admit it, but like this game just is not like meeting expectations. And I think there are a handful of people who are like being brave about this and coming out and being honest that like yeah, Xbox just can't compete with Nintendo anymore. They're done. But like there are a handful of hardcore fanboys who just don't want to admit it's true, right? Like there are a couple of hardcore fanboys who are just clinging on to Dark Souls, clinging on to Baldur's Gate 3, like clinging on to Final Fantasy 16, to Diablo 4, to Street Fighter 6, like doing anything they possibly can to deny reality that Nintendo has won the console war, and now they're doing their victory lap. Now they're preparing for their next major step, which is taking on these big multimedia brands, taking on Mattel, taking on Disney, taking on like Warner Brothers, taking on all these corporations, right? Like in the next 30 years, they're going to be like grow into an absolute behemoth and I think surpass like basically every major entertainment company in the West, which has spent the past 20 years like disenfranchising all of their talent in favor of like chasing woke trends. Like I think Nintendo is in the position to be the biggest entertainment company in the world 30 to 50 years from now, right? Like I think they are on the trajectory to do that. And it's weird to see like so many people like refuse to like admit this is happening. Like so many people are still trying to write off the Super Mario Bros. Movie, trying to write off like Tears of the Kingdom success, trying to write off like Nintendo as a whole, but in reality, like it's the exact opposite. Like it's crazy how someone like Sean Malmstrom, like to this day, is he's like obsessively trying to talk down about Super Mario Bros. Wonder when that game is like shaping up to sell over 20 million units. Like it's practically guaranteed that game is going to sell significantly more than New Super Mario Bros. U for a variety of reasons, and this guy just won't see it. Like this guy just doesn't see it. Like he's just raging about the game for really no reason, and I I feel like that's the issue with like analysts in this sphere is that too many of them don't actually play games. All they care about is looking at sales numbers and just like, oh, Grand Theft Auto and sold 100 million units. Clearly, it's the best. Clearly, that's the best investment. Like they don't see how well Pokemon does, right? They don't see how like more frequent those releases are. They don't see how Pokemon has better merchandising. It doesn't see the anime. It doesn't see the spin-off titles. It doesn't see the variety in content. It doesn't see the innovations. And Pokemon has had way more innovations than Grand Theft Auto ever has. Like like they don't see that because they don't play the games and they don't understand why people come back and play Pokemon over and over and over again. People can scream about the branding all they want, but the reason the brand is so strong, the reason why people are so passionate about this stuff is because it has been so consistently good since the 90s. Even if people spend all their time crying about Game Freak. So, like my point is going into this is that like the days of pretending that stuff like Starfield can be game of the year are over, right? Like right now we're kind of in this phase where Nintendo is regularly taking away like major major genres away from companies that established that traditionally controlled them, right? The open world formula, that was like a big deal 10 years ago for other platforms. The shooter genre, that was a big deal. Online games, stuff like that. Like fighting games is a big one. Like Super Smash Bros is the most popular fighting game in the world by far now, right? Like Nintendo is like taking over all these genres, and all anybody can do is just make excuses for it. Like try to say that like, oh, but the Xbox does this. It has better online play. It has Game Pass. It has this like Joy-Con drift. Like they'll try and whine and cry about like all manner of things, like complaining about like Mario's voice actor being replaced. Like they'll throw anything out there to try and like continue presenting this narrative that there's a problem with Nintendo that nobody knows about. But in reality, there is no problem, at least at this stage, right? I'm not naive enough to like say that like Nintendo is going to be like pure and the greatest thing ever forever, right? Like I honestly kind of expected them to go downhill after Iwata, and I cannot begin to tell you how thankful I am that to see that like the current leadership Furukawa has really stayed the course and really made the Switch a success. There are there are a lot of things that need to be said about Nintendo, right? People need to understand like how much people love working for Nintendo. Like it has like a 99.8 like retention rate there. Like it's a big deal, right? Like people don't realize that they don't crunch their employees. They don't respect that. Like they just constantly just make up all sorts of weird stories about them, about how they're mistreating everyone, YouTubers, their development teams, how Game Freak is ruining Pokemon. It's all a grift. Like none of it is true. None of it ever has been true. And my goal with the channel going forward is to keep focusing on and exposing this kind of nonsense. And I think the big thing this year is kind of let us take a step back and admit just how good The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom actually was. No other game this year came even close to what Tears of the Kingdom accomplished. And right now, a lot of people in the industry are in denial that that's true. Starfield couldn't compete, Baldur's Gate 3 couldn't compete, Final Fantasy 16 couldn't compete. All anybody can talk about is how Tears of the Kingdom is not as good as what people all anybody can do is try to pretend that Tears of the Kingdom is not as good as people say it is without really putting forward an adequate explanation why. Tears of the Kingdom is far superior to anything Bethesda will ever produce.